This episode is brought to you by Small Talk. Have you ever been at a disaster party? One where everyone sips from their solo cups and just kind of says hi to each other? Hey, polite nod. Hey there, chin gesture. Well, next time, come prepared with Small Talk. Small Talk is the complete entertainment system that turns your casual get-together or epic social happening from pooper to super. What's more, mastering Small Talk can get you lucrative job offers. I didn't know if I'd get here on time. I lost track converting my 401k to the latest crypto. No, I'm really not supposed to tell you about it, but... Or raise your esteem in the community. So I told the HOA, I know how to get everyone to paint their houses yellow. Or get it on with attractive potential partners. Say, aren't those high heels Manolo Blahnik? Why do you know so much about women's shoes? What's more, you can combine Small Talk with their popular downloadable content, alcohol, in order to get even more powerful positive results. And use the promo code REREAD, one word, to try out their advanced pack that will have everyone swarming around you dying to hear more. So in 1497, in the year of the treath, Fëanor led the Noldor out of Valinor, including his half-niece Galadriel. I know you've heard of her. Of course, they'd been warned by the Dumamandos that they'd regret this and would not be able to come back, but they were obsessed with getting the Silmarils back from Melkor. Sure enough, Fëanor was soon killed in a battle with Gothmog, Lord of the Bog. And thank you, Small Talk, for sponsoring the Rereading Wolf podcast. This episode is brought to you by the support of generous listeners just like you. You can learn how to be one of them at patreon.com/rereadingwolf. And thank you, listener patrons, for supporting the Rereading Wolf podcast.
Warning. The following discussion is deliberately riddled with spoilers and unhinged speculation on this nearly 40-year-old book, Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun. You can't read a Gene Wolfe story. You can only reread a Gene Wolfe story.
Welcome to Rereading Wolf. We don't pretend that this is the first time you and we have read these books. We want to understand them in as much detail as possible, and that means considering the works as a whole.
Hi, I'm James Wynn.
And I'm Craig Brewer.
Craig,
hello.
We have corrections.
Yes, we do.
Hey, you was wrong. You was wrong.
Okay, so multiple people, I hesitate to name just one, noted that my description of a domino was incorrect. A domino is a small eye mask, sort of the kind that that maybe superheroes wear in 30s comic books, right? A little tiny mask covering the eyes, but not much else. Yeah. But to be honest, what I was describing was a coronet that the Flying Nun used. And but honestly, how often am I really going to get a chance to mention the Flying Nun? So, I mean, you cannot. No one could blame me. None dare blame me.
It's certainly less often than it used to be. It seems like there used to be jokes about the Flying Nun all the time, and now,
it's a lost art.
Kids today just don't know.
Incidentally, the Flying Nun was based on a novel from 1965. And it was originally called The 15th Pelican. So,
I didn't know that, actually. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, not a coronet as I was describing, but it's a domino, a little tiny eye mask. Well done. Well done. On Blue Sky, Adrian Tchaikovsky notes that in the costume list for the party, he says, is it me or do most of the costumes involve almost no clothes? Autochthons, zoanthropes, naked philosophers. Yeah. He says, is Severian at a sex party and he's just oblivious? Probably.
Well, the
as
way
it turns out,
he and Thecla, go after it pretty soon.
Or Cyriaca, yeah. That was a correction. Yeah. Oh, another correction. And someone noted that our pronunciation of Cyriaca is probably wrong. That in Byzantine times, where the saint comes from, it would be Cyriaca. And
Cyriaca, yeah.
Right.
That's
We
probably
should
true.
use the best translation. But
Yep.
we've recorded most of those episodes already, so it'll probably be doing it wrong for a while.
Yeah. So my apology. That's another one that's just how I've always said it. Just like we talked about how it should probably be Triscally or I forget now. Shoot, I forget exactly what people said it was, and then we were just
Triscale.
Triscale.
I think we finally came down to Triscally was someone convinced me that Triscally was the best one.
Okay. And then I know there was argument about Guile or Geol or
yes,
Y'all or something. Yeah. There's others. And honestly, there's a lot, and not that I think that the pronunciation talk is dumb or anything at all, but at the same time, there comes a point where you just gotta keep doing what you're doing. So
yeah,
and I mean, you can always get away with the argument too that these weren't the actual words that were said, because Wolfe said he's translating from the future and when another language was being used. So I mean, it's all kind of I mean, the original word may have been there, but maybe saying it slightly incorrectly actually gives it a better sound, just like the bad translation of terminus est is maybe a more accurate. Just I don't know. Anyway,
yeah. Well, let's see. Also, Mantis, Michael Andre Driussi, said, as I noted somewhere else, common costume conundrum. At the big costume party in Thrax, Severian sees multiple persons in the paired costumes of Ablegates and their acolytes. Historically, an Ablegate is an envoy of the papal see who brings a newly appointed cardinal his insignia of office. The role must exist in the Commonwealth, if only in legend. But what sort of costume would be instantly recognizable as being that of an Ablegate remains completely unknown. This reveal is a subtle paradox that readers have a better picture of costumes depicting autochthons, gymnosophists, eremites, eidolons, zoanthropes, and remontados than the costumes of Ablegates. Granted, he says that this collection of costumes is a greater or lesser paradox. I remain curious how everyone can tell at a glance the Ablegates in particular. Upon reflection of this moment, perhaps it's as simple as, quote, the party goer is bearing a cardinal's insignia for delivery. That is, never mind the clothing, it's only the open carry of the insignia that establishes the role. Simple schmimple. Yeah, well, very good question. And it's true for all of these, actually. How does Severian recognize, say, a remontado as being that versus maybe, I don't know, a gymnophist or an eremite or we talked about how do you know it's an eidolon? Yeah. So Craig, somebody, and I can't find the quote, I'm going through it all, suggested that Casdo and her husband were remontados. Remember, that's somebody who exiles themselves and retreats to the mountains. Yeah,
and that certainly makes sense. I mean, they seem to have that sort of pioneer type attitude.
He has and Severian kind of stipulates why is it, what would cause her husband to retreat, to such a remote place.
Yeah, and her husband, is it her father or Casdo's father? I can't remember who the old man's actual father is. But I think, he talks about growing up in a town and knowing all these other people. So it does seem like, and he knew Fetchin, he knew the famous artist when he was younger.
Right.
So he seems to have grown up in a big city. And these folk have gone out somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay. So let's do another one. Adrian Ian says on Facebook, this one strikes me as almost like the play in Chambers King of Yellow. It's Severian playing the stranger and Cyriaca playing both Casita and Camilla. Camilla, she says. He says, you should unmask, stranger. Indeed. Casilda, indeed, it's time. We all have laid aside disguise but you. Stranger, I wear no mask. Camilla, terrified aside to Casilda, no mask, no mask. Yeah, that's a little bit like that. I see that. And retreating to Reddit again, Eddie Arendt says, it always struck me as surprising that Cyriaca figured out what Severian was there for so quickly. However, if we accept that it's somewhat natural assumption on her part, then I think at least two things follow. Firstly, that whatever she did was something that might lead to her husband wanting her dead. And secondly, that the new Carnifex via the Archon might be the method used. So the second thing seemed interesting. Just because we know that Severian is newly arrived and there was nobody like him in the role previously. So it can't be that the local torturer is always carrying out this sort of work. It's unusual, in fact, for there to be a local torturer anywhere. So it can't even really be an assumption based on how they commonly act elsewhere. We also know that Abdicius was the one who asked for someone to be sent. So if it's some sort of general assumption, then it seems quite possible that this sort of work, secret executions, possibly even Cyriaca's specifically, was the reason that Severian was called for in the first place. Or at least that's the rumor, and the rumor is true. Oh, that's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I do like the sort of complicated rationale for that, that you find out more detail later. It's sort of the fun way to think of why he would have been, why Thrax in particular, why be sent there. And who knows, maybe it was just something that came up when it started. At first, it was just like, yep, just a good excuse for them to get rid of Severian, for Wolfe to have some way to send him away. And then once he gets there and starts developing characters in Thrax, he's like, oh, maybe we could flesh out this reason for this and that one. Yeah, could be. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
Okay, so one other thing, we have Marcus Govia's comment on Facebook.
Yep, he kind of took something that I had suggested and developed it in a lot that I like. It has to do with thinking of Severian's memory. When he says he has a perfect memory, one way to think about that is maybe not that he means perfect, is that it is completely 100% accurate, but perfect in the sense that what he does is tell the best story, and he puts the best meaning together from his memory, which is a different kind of perfecting in the sense of finishing or completing for certain purposes, and rather than just perfect recall. And he said, it strikes me as an approach with a lot of potential. It says, we already know that what we have in hand is not a transparent history of an event, but Severian's own account, and he's going back over his memory. So he's actually maybe then not just recounting it, but he is editing it, just as a writer does who returns again and again over the story. The difference lies in that he is not editing it by telling it falsely, but changing maybe the sense of what actually happened. And he makes a comment too that there's a sense in which that's kind of what the first Severian theory is about too. The idea that you're going to be sort of going back to relive your life, but in a way that does things a little differently, or a little better, and lead to different outcomes. So there's a way even that calling him his memory being perfect is not so much that he just accurately remembers whatever happened, but that he can go back and make the things have happened in maybe a slightly different way, either from living it over again, like for Severian theory, or kind of just making sense of the past a little bit more. The reason I like that too is, and I think I brought this up, I can't remember if I did, or he certainly brings up Proust as well, but points out that that's kind of how Proust talks about it, that it's going back and retelling these memories is not just a way to get the memories back, but to really finally go back and say, okay, well, what did this mean? How is this important to me? How is this impactful? Now, I think that's a way of thinking about it that a lot of people might see as cheating. If your perfect memory is just supposed to be a superpower, but I don't know, there's also a strong sense that that's what memoirs actually do, is you go back and a memoir is not so that you go back and lie about the past, but you write a memoir to go back and figure out, okay, how did I get from there to here?
Right. What's the story?
And what's the actual story that happened? And whether or not that's going back and discovering something that was there, or whether it's going back and making a story out of random things that happened, maybe that's a question. But I think, honestly, I think for a lot of people, the very idea of something like counseling or therapy, you go back to talk about your past in order not just to figure out what actually happened, but in order to make sense of it and integrate it now so that you can keep moving forward. And maybe there's a sense that that's what Severian's doing here as well. So much more sort of higher level, more complicated, more subtle kind of sense of what he means by his perfect memory. But I like it. I like it as really just a compelling way to think about it.
This kind of feels potentially adjacent to Mantis's theory from the Book of the Short Sun. And don't worry, this isn't a spoiler. That the narrator has an ability to inject himself into stories.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe.
Yeah. Totally. Anyway, I liked it. It's a nice way to develop that, and there was some good back and forth about that one too. So, thanks, Marcus.
Yeah, very good. Okay, well,
and now it is on to the chapter. And like we said, we're probably going to have the comments be a little shorter for a while here, just to help us get things done. So if we missed a comment that you had sent us or an email, we apologize. If there's something you'd really want us to talk about sometime, please feel free to, send us another email or just say, hey, I was really excited about this.
I really wanted an answer. Yeah.
And if you feel that strongly, we are more than open to taking a reminder and a little nudge. And
Actually, a lot of the comments for people is, this was a great chapter. Get on with Cyriaca's story.
A lot more about that. Even one from last time from Cyriaca where oh shoot, who was it? Oh, I forget. Somebody was like, yep, cool and all, but now I really want to get to the super intelligent robots.
Right. Yeah. Bring on the robots.
And one thing I should say, I'm going to anticipate if you were hoping that we would make some connection between this story and Dune and all of its backstory with the history between intelligent machines and computers and AI wars and all that. Unless I'm wrong, James, I don't think we did. So is that, I don't know if that's an anticipatory thing, but I mean, Wolfe was writing this at the same time that Dune had been coming out, a little after, but Dune was certainly in the conversation a bit at the time. So,
although he did say, however, someone asked him, how much did Dune influence your writing of, I don't know if he was talking about specifically the Book of the New Sun or his writing in general. And he said little to none. So
that's what he said.
He didn't see it that way. He didn't see himself as being influenced by that. And he didn't seem to really like the idea that he would be influenced by that, which strikes me as entirely believable.
Yeah. And to be fair, Frank Herbert did not have a monopoly on stories of smart machines having some kind of conflict or leaving Earth, but he just one of the big ones to develop it as a big part of the backstory. So,
or even science fiction with a fantasy flair.
Right. Right.
All right. Well, at this point, I guess I'm ready for someone to sit down and tell me a story. People don't tell me stories nearly enough while having sex with me. And so this is something where Severian lives a far more interesting life than me. So
off we go with that.
Here we go. Yeah.
Chapter 6, The Library of the Citadel.
So we return to mid-conversation with Severian and Cyriaca at the party. Here we are about 24 hours from the beginning of this volume. In my opinion, it's been right at 4 lunar months since Severian was elevated. Cyriaca is coming on to Severian pretty hard. I think she has reasons, right? I think she knows why Severian's here, and I think he suspects who she is, or at least he will before this conversation is over.
Yeah, and I am still slightly skeptical of exactly when she figures it out. I just don't know if it's, I mean, we know when she says she does, but it is, a very good point that maybe she's coming on to him because she's already in survival seduction mode. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, okay. So we didn't talk about her name yet, right? Saint Cyriaca is actually an appropriate name for this character. She was also known as Dominica, which brings to mind the name of the Pellarine's mother. I assume it was the mother, Domicella, right? Saint Cyriaca was a 3rd century Roman widow and patroness who sheltered persecuted Christians, which might be a way of imagining all of her affairs. And she was whipped to death, and she was a distribution hub of charities for the poor under St. Lawrence. And this was during a particularly vigorous persecution in Rome by Emperor Valerian. Not surprisingly, this occurred during Rome's crisis of the 3rd century when the whole thing nearly ended. And Emperor Valerian was captured and held in Persia until his death. And Valerian was going into battle, and he sent word to Rome to start the persecution. And Pope Sixtus II was martyred during this time. Cyriaca, Saint Cyriaca, is primarily significant for being associated with a much more famous saint, St. Lawrence. And so I hope to find some sort of parallel in him to Severian, but no can do. He does have an interesting story. According to an account written about 100 years later, St. Lawrence was the archdeacon of Rome and in charge of the treasury and the distribution of the charity. So the prefect of Rome demanded that he hand over all the money. So he said, why, yes, let me get right onto that. I'll have to, get it all together. It's not a bank, So see you in 3 days. And then he immediately distributed all the money. And he returned to the prefect with a bunch of poor, crippled, blind, and sick people and said, here's our treasure right here. We are so much richer than the emperor. And the prefect was not amused, and he had him roasted over a fire. And then, after suffering for a long time, he was reported to have said, I'm well done on this side, turn me over. and this is why he's the patron saint of cooks and chefs and comedians.
and that's all, the best part, right there.
Yeah. And
long way to go for a joke, but
yeah. And all quite beside the point. But I really enjoyed that story, so I'm sharing it.
So, there's a lot of potential things there to try and connect there, but I don't know. This is another one where I'm not sure. I don't know. Do you have any sense of exactly, does the saint attach to Cyriaca particularly?
Not very well. No.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot. It feels more like you'd be picking out some small detail that would be in there. So this might be another one to chalk up to the just needed a saint name, and this is a particularly nice feminine name in a certain way.
But also sometimes he goes for puns or allusions, so it might be useful to pick, look for something like that. But I didn't see anything. So let's see. Cyriaca has just reclined seductively on the couch, and she and Severian are sharing in a partially but not entirely secluded alcove.
Yeah, she says, no, Severian, instead of unmasking your face, you must unmask your spirit. Later, you will do that by showing me everything you would do were you free to do whatever you wished. And now by telling me everything I want to know about you. You come from Nessus. I've learned that much. Why are you so eager to find the Pellerines?
So Severian starts to answer, but a man and woman, walk in front of the alcove. The man is dressed in a San Benito, and the woman is dressed as a midinette. I don't know. But these are both mildly difficult words to explain, and I'm going to spend far too much time explaining them than their position in this story warrants.
But it is a costume party, so we need.
Yeah. So a midinette, that's probably what it means here is a shop girl in a retail store. It's a strange costume in that it seems so mundane, but maybe it's not mundane in this culture. Maybe shop girls have a very distinctive look. It could also mean that she's dressed as a rose, or it could mean she's dressed as a light lunch, a half sandwich or something. The shop girls in Paris came to be called midinites or midinettes because they had to eat these quick light lunches because they didn't get a lot of time off, or in order to stay thin. I don't know. Probably, though, she's dressed as a shop girl.
I did find one other thing about midinette is just that they were shop girls, but it was more like a fancy dress shop girl where they were working girls, but they were often very well dressed and stylish. And
okay. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Sometimes even seen as consorts a little bit. just because they were sort of like kind of like high paid mobsters, girlfriends kind of stuff.
But because they were working and they were single, and it's probably considered suspect, and probably for the culture of the time, they probably wasn't entirely untrue all the time. So
and apparently the main character of La Boheme is that, so that makes kind of sense of just someone who is kind of a not a girl of questionable morals, but just someone who has a little more freedom, a young sort of something like a bit of a bachelor of the day. So
she might be dressed basically as a sexy nurse or something like that.
Could well be.
Right. Okay, so the man, however, he's dressed in a San Benito. Probably he's dressed as a person being subjected to some kind of indictment or punishment for being a heretic. The etymology of the word is uncertain, but how to describe it with words? Have you seen a Catholic or Episcopal priest, sometimes Presbyterian or Methodist pastor? He'll wear a long white single vestment, and then over it, he'll have a long piece of cloth with a hole in the middle for his head and drapes it over the front and back, right? This is basically a San Benito, but a heretic would be made to wear one of these during one of the Inquisitions, but it would have like red or yellow X's over the front and the back. And that's if they were a penitent heretic. Given the other costumes that we've seen, it's inviting to think that maybe this costume party is on a particular holiday that has or originally had a religious connotation of penitence. Obviously, no one here is repenting from anything.
No, I also like the idea that this is just some kind of like, he's dressed up as a prisoner, criminal or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking, because this particular outfit is worn ostensibly to show that you are doing penance, and as I said, it was used particularly during the Spanish Inquisition. Convicted heretics had to wear it, so one could imagine that it's something that Severian, like you said, something that Severian was familiar with in the practical sense. And I went down a rabbit hole on this because it's potential connection to Severian's line of work. During the Inquisition of Spain, Portugal, and Mexico, if you were a penitent heretic, the San Benito would, like I said, would have the colored X on both sides. In other words, the shame of wearing the outfit was part of your punishment. Mm-hmm. But you'd also wear this conical cap, like a dunce cap. And in Roman Catholic European countries, you'll sometimes see pictures of religious brotherhood organizations wearing masked conical caps and outfits in a parade or something. And this looks weird, to Americans, I should say, because it calls to mind the Ku Klux Klan. But this is to say that, context is everything, right? In those settings, the outfit suggests religious austerity. And in this type of San Benito that's San Benito with an N as in Nancy. In this case, it's called a San Benito with an M as in Mary. Now, Craig, if you were an impenitent heretic, your tunic had flames and dragons and devils and a drawing of you. And you'd wear this and your conical cap, and you'd be led to be burnt at the stake. And in this case, the outfit was called a samara. And Craig, this means of execution, being burnt at the stake, was called an auto da fe, which means an act of faith, which is, I think, super ironic euphemism, since it's unclear, are we talking about the Inquisitor's faith or the condemned? So if your tunic only had flames on it pointing down, then it's called a fuego revolto. And that means that for some reason you've been given the act of mercy to be strangled at the post before you're burnt. So I got all this from a guy wearing a costume as he walked by.
That's awesome. I mean, it just has very dark. There's something actually in the video game Dark Souls, which I know we've talked about before, but there's some character somewhere that is like, it's some, anyway, I'm wondering if it was connected to this, because I remember it had something to do with being like someone who was about to be executed, but they were undead or something like that. Some kind of prisoner for religious reasons that, was still alive, and you had to fight him or something like that. So, but anyway, just curious.
So my interpretation is that Severian starts to answer her question about why he's looking for the Pellerines. But this man dressed as a convicted heretic and a woman dressed as shop girl pass by. And naturally, Severian, he doesn't want to say that he has the claw in front of them, but he guesses based on some vague, subtle clues that they know that he's an actual Carnifex. So he pretends not to notice and just says, something that belongs to the Pellerines came into my hands by accident. I want to return it to them.
And she says, you're not going to do them harm then? Can you tell me what it is?
And again, Severian doesn't want to say that he has the claw of the conciliator. And if he doesn't say, then she's going to demand that he show it to her. So he lies. He says, it's a book, an old book, beautifully illustrated. I don't pretend to know anything about books, but I'm sure it's of religious importance and quite valuable. And to double down on it, he pulls out the brown book, which we know is just as meaningful a relic, especially to Severian, as the thorn in the resin container. And as I said before, I think a lot of the stories in this book, maybe all of them, are about Severian himself. So it's meaningful as a symbol in that sense. And this is the first mention of the book since this volume started 5 chapters ago.
Yep. And it is a nice moment, too, like you said, those stories are part of the same story. They're little extensions of Severian's story in different ways. They have that meaningful thing that you've got books within books about themselves throughout everywhere here. So the fact that he's sort of, sliding this in place of the claw is perfectly appropriate.
Of course, she's not very impressed with this volume, actually.
She says, old, yes, and pretty water-stained, I see.
And Severian is pretty hard on his books, as we know.
And then she asks to look at it. May I look at it?
So he gives it to her, and she thumbs through it quickly and stops at an illustration of a Sicinus. Way back in Shadow of the Torturer, so long ago, we discussed how important all forms of live theater seem to be in Severian's culture. The word here seems to be used as a plural noun, Sicines, a plural for Sicini. But a Sicinus is a particular kind of dance that is integral to the Dionysian satyr plays. These were performed during the Dionysian, am I saying that right? Dionysian festivals.
Dionysian. I've heard all kinds of things.
So. Yeah. So it's performed during the Dionysian festivals. And the dancers called Sicinistae had a particular role in the play that was similar to the chorus, which these plays, also employed. At the festivals, there would be 3 tragedies performed in succession, and then there would be a satyr play, which was written by tragic poets and would have to be like comedic versions of a tragedy. I'm outside my expertise, but this is how it seems to me. The satyr play would have a chorus of satyrs with costumes centered around their erect phalluses and lots of particularly low humor. Boobs and fart jokes were standard. And Aeschylus was famous for his satyr plays. I haven't been able to get any details on the Sicinus dance, but the illustration that Cyriaca examined include horned men and sylphs, and a sylph is a forest nymph. So the satyrs and sexy nymphs is definitely part of the illustration of Sicinus. But after that, she gives the book back, and she says, I don't know much about books either.
No. And then she says, I have an uncle who knows a lot about books, and I think he would pay you a lot for this one. I wish you were here tonight so he could see it, though perhaps it's all for the best, because I'd probably try to get it from you in some way.
Maybe she's kidding. If not, she doesn't seem to think she owes the Pellerines anything. Or maybe she's just acknowledging that she was never cut out to be a Pellerine.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun, kind of like,
flirting or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So she says of her uncle, though, in every pentad, he travels as far as I ever did when I was with the Pellerines, just to seek out old books.
I think a pentad is 5 years, but it might be 5 months for all I know.
Yeah.
It means any group of 5 things.
Yeah. So he's even gone to the Lost Archives. Have you heard about those?
Severian shakes his head and no. And Craig, here we go. This is why this is one of my favorite chapters.
We get a sort of bit of a dump of mythological dump here of sort. Yeah, so she says, all I know is what he once told me when he had drunk a little more of our estate cuvée than he usually takes.
Yeah, a cuvée is a French term for wine. It's complicated.
the easiest explanation is that it's a kind of blended wine. So perhaps, Cyriaca grew up on a vineyard.
Yeah. And we should note, too, I really doubt that her uncle is another character that we've met. I don't think.
No,
But
I don't think
it's
so.
tempting whenever you get something like this to be like, okay, well, is this another form of
like Groucho or something being her husband or something like that.
Something like that.
Have we bumped into this fellow in the past?
Or if like what I was wondering is this something else where he's possibly Father Anire, but I don't think so. But anyway, it's just characters who are mentioned with interesting backgrounds are always interesting.
Well, we'll get to this in a minute, or maybe it's in the next chapter. I can't remember. But there is a theory that Cyriaca is a member of Severian's family.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that's true, then so is his uncle.
Yeah. So, but she goes on. It may be that he didn't tell me everything, because as I talked to him, I had the feeling he was a bit afraid I might try to go myself. I never have, though I've regretted it sometimes. Anyway, in Nessus, a long way south of the city most people visit, so far down the great river, in fact, that most people think the city would have ended long before, there stands an ancient fortress.
I think we can agree without dispute that this is the Citadel. She says she's regretted never going, but Severian knows that she would probably have regretted it if she ever did, because it would probably mean that she was sent to the tower.
Yeah. It's also nice, though, that we finally have somebody who recognizes the Citadel is a real thing. Like there've been, apart from the autarch himself, it seems like nobody else really seems to even people in the city were sort of
they treat it as a myth. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that I know a long time ago. I used to wonder, like, well, okay, is Severian just imagining that whole upbringing or something like that? But yeah, anyway, just nice that somebody else finally recognized.
But Severian has moved this far north, and now he has literally been someone who walked out of a story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
So she says, everyone, save perhaps for the autarch himself, may his spirit live in 1,000 successors, has forgotten it long ago, and it's supposed to be haunted. It stands upon a hill overlooking Guile, my uncle told me, staring out over a field of ruined sepulchres, guarding nothing.
She says, may his spirit live in 1,000 successors. We have up till now, the autarchs, his true nature, the fact that he eats brains and he contains all of the people of his previous successors.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of seems to have been treated as a state secret. But
here
it seems like she knows very well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing that it's ambiguous enough that it, just makes you kind of go side eye. Like, do you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And the Citadel, we're talking about the Citadel, and she's talking about the lost archives in Olton's library. And she's using her hands to demonstrate her words. And Severian senses that this is a story that she's told many times. She eats out on this story all the time. And he thinks maybe she's told it to her children. And for what it's worth, we're going to get a comparison between her and Severian's mother. So if you want to argue that she's Severian's mother here she is telling a story to her child.
Yeah, and this passage mixes up a couple of things. It makes up all those suggestions about kids, and then it also makes up suggestions about her as like an actor as well, which... I mean, it could just be exactly what he's saying. Yeah, she's just told the story to her kids very well. But the fact that he's, it just seems like there are a lot of things about Cyriaca that definitely give this aura of knowing a whole lot more than she should, or just being aware of things, like she has some mysterious past that isn't just her uncle filling her with, cool stories and lots of information about places. But no, not really sure.
Yeah. And to double down on this, Severian goes off on this theme as an opportunity to compare her to all the girls that he's loved before.
As he is wont to do. So he says, it made me conscious that she was indeed old enough to have children, old enough themselves to have listened to this and other tales many times. No years had marked her smooth, sensuous face, But the candle of youth that burned so brightly still in Dorcas, and had shed its clear, unworldly light even about Jolenta, that had shone so hard and bright behind Thecla's strength, and had lit the mist-shrouded paths of the necropolis when her sister Thea took Vodalus's pistol at the graveside, had in her been extinguished so long that not even the perfume of its flame remained. I pitied her.
Ouch.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's like from Severian's perspective, that's just being harsh. But
yeah, this is the sort of thing that gets you a bad reputation.
Yeah, but it also might be the kind of thing where it's, to an immature person, that description,
someone who's not even very old
himself, and
old.
it's like, here's someone who just isn't, obsessed with you, Severian, who's like seen a lot of other things too. But it's a cool thing because it emphasizes that point again about how, she's got a background. And it also does like Severian still maps out his life in terms of the women. And in some ways, this is kind of like a big flag that, here's another one coming, a big relationship moment that's gonna be important in Severian's life for big reasons, which, it is.
Yeah, and now, Craig, the moment of truth. We get some history.
Yep. So she says, you must know the story of how the race of ancient days reached the stars, which, by the way, this kind of, I don't know if this story comes out of the blue, but it's, it's not, I mean, yeah, she's talking about stories that her uncle told her, but it is kind of,
and she likes to tell. According to Severian, she just likes to tell this story.
Yeah, she has fun with it. So there's not really
Oh, you're from Nessus? Oh, I know a story about something
that you could learn in Nessus, but is really about the history of the universe, which is weird. That's why I said it's like a weird left turn, because it's not about Nessus, it's not about things, although it is maybe connected to kind of like how the stories of the Brown Book are sort of mythological, but they haven't been talking about that. So yeah, it rereading at this time, it just seemed a little conspicuous that this is the story she segues into somehow, and it's just not.
This is the story of the building of the library, ostensibly, right? That's why it matters. So she's going to tell, and the rest of the history comes into it.
So. But so she says, you must know the story of how the race of ancient days reached the stars, and how they bargained away all the wild half of themselves to do so that they no longer cared for the taste of the pale wind, nor for love or lust, nor to make new songs, nor to sing old ones, nor for any of the other animal things they believed they had brought with them out of the rainforests at the bottom of time. Though in fact, so my uncle told me, those things brought them. And before we get into like treating the mythology, one thing that's cool is that also might be how she sees herself in her experience. Like when Severian's talking about how her youth is gone, there's a sense in which the way she tells this story here is about like, a race that somehow lost its youth and lustfulness. And
that's a good connection.
It's just a nice, there is a personal, I'd never noticed that really before between Severian's reaction and the way the story starts, but kind of interesting.
So you know how I am, Craig. I'm going to translate this story as best as I can. If you have doubts about my interpretation, then you ought to correct me.
Mark's not here to fight, so it's all good.
Yeah. Well, I miss him. We get a story here of the ancient interstellar empire that, I presume, ended when the Yasadis struck the sun in the time of Typhon, it seems. And at some point in its history, this empire was facilitated by turning humans into dehumanized parts of a massive galactic empire machine. No emotions, no desires, no stories, no songs or personalized creation. Think of the nation in Orwell's 1984, right? The anti-sex and all that. Well, so this was deemed to be the most efficient way to live. And all those things were considered artifacts, relics of humanity's primitive origins in the forest. But according to Cyriaca's uncles, these were in fact the things that led them out of the forest, the things that made them, distinct from nature, right? Yep. So I'm coming around to believe that this is the time that Jonas, Robo Jonas, is from.
he asked Severian if he'd ever heard the name Kim Lee-sung. And of course, this is a very common name where he comes from. And I believe everyone was named Kim Lee-sung in this time. Personal identities for humans were a kind of sin. And yes, this is a not so subtle nod to the ideals of North Korea and also the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. Pol Pot had told the populace that he needed them to work to bring about his imagined paradise and that people should make themselves like the ox, just work. And that's, I think this is the meaning behind the Aeschylean's statement, behind our efforts, let there be found our efforts. I'm disturbed by some readers finding that statement inspiring in this line of the Aeschylean's Book of Prose phrases. I don't think Wolfe intended that way. I think it means that we should stop looking for meaning in our labor, just focus on the labor. It's a body without a soul. And this was the creed of the intergalactic empire, at least at some point. Not really a creed, because a creed implies volition. This is just the way it was. So that's what I think. That's what I think she's describing.
I think that's fair given kind of what it is. I think there's also a way to read what she's describing in a bit more of a kind of generic mythological take on like the difference between humans and then becoming robots, or becoming AI, or just kind of the distinction between humanity as a natural thing and then technology in some ways. Which is more how I've always read it, that it's kind of like saying there was a backstory where we had AI and robots and we had all these technological wonders. And at a certain point they kind of took us over. But they knew
we handed them over,
or we handed ourselves over. Just like we handed ourselves over to cell phones now, that kind of thing. But right. There is that sense in which what she's describing could also be allegorical in that sense. And that I think it's cool that it plays both ways pretty well, because it also does go right into, like you said, other parts of the mythology that's pointed to in other parts of the book. So I don't think that's necessarily wrong. It's sort of more of a specific way to read kind of the way I took it then. But like I said, I think it still fits. I think it still makes the point. The question would be, and we'll get into this in a bit as we get through here, but like, what does it mean about the things that they were leaving behind and the lessons that have to get taught and relearned?
Well, this is we see this a lot in a lot of sci-fi dystopias where humans have given up on all of their emotions, right? Yeah. They've given up on art. They've given up on craft. That's kind of like Metropolis, right? Where everyone is just work for the machine.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's cool about it though is that here it doesn't just end in a war where one side wins. Instead, you end up with this cool, we got to get to it. We haven't actually gotten to that yet. So
okay, yeah, go on.
Okay. And or you should know, that those to whom they sold those things, who were the creations of their own hands, hated them in their hearts. And truly they had hearts, though the men who had made them never reckoned with that. Anyway, they resolved to ruin their makers, and they did it by returning, when mankind had spread to 1,000 sons, all that had been left with them long before. So much, at least, you should know. My uncle once told it to me, as I have told it to you, and he found all that and more recorded in a book in his collection. It was a book no one had opened, as he believed, for a Chiliad.
Yeah. A Chiliad, of course, is a millennium, 1,000 years. Her uncle was a book collector, and he had a book that, so far as he believed, had not been read before him for 1,000 years. So this book itself is describing events from ancient deep history, and his is a relic from deep history. This is a story, it appears, of a robot revolution. Those to whom they sold those things, gave away their humanity, their emotions, their desires, creative spark, were the creations of their own hands. All their literature and emotions and desirings were preserved as artifacts in their manufactured slaves. And we'll see more of what this could mean in the Book of the Long Sun and also in the novel A Borrowed Man, right? In fact, there's a scene where
in A Borrowed Man, where the protagonist, Ernest Smith, says, it looks like mankind's in the retirement. They're just basically mankind's going away, and all they want to reproduce are their artifacts that are simulating them.
The next question here, and this is the part that I think is confusing in this passage, is what exactly she means about all those things that they sold, because that's
look at the artifacts in A Borrowed Man. You have simulations, you have robots, you have clones. All these things have all the emotions and minds of the people that they were based on, that they were formatted on, right? But those people themselves, they want to live forever. That's all they want. They want to live with fewer people. They're actually devoted. The world. This isn't really a spoiler, because you find out with Willie in the first few chapters that the world has shrunk from 8 billion to maybe 1 billion people in about 150 years. And meanwhile, so the Earth is being depopulated, and meanwhile it's being populated instead by robots and by simulations. So the simulations are all getting their jobs. They start as slaves, but they can actually buy their freedom and buy themselves a body to walk around in. So this is kind of a situation for analogous to what we see here, where humankind basically created robots to create their art for them if they need it, if it need to be done, or to be built, or to build their ships. Although they didn't really value these things anymore, right? There's nothing in the culture. Everything is about efficiency, and so but these things still exist in their AIs and their simulations.
And what I was saying that's hard to nail down. Like, I like ultimately what I think he's saying, because this is a story where the humans just sort of, they make robots, but they themselves become more robotic, right? They lose their humanity, which was the thing that was pushing them to make new things and all that in the first place. But what's cool is, instead of just like some idea of stealing it back from the robots, what actually is that happens is that the robots had that heart. The robots weren't without souls, really, is kind of what it's saying. And that they still had that in them, and they're the ones who are able to come back to humanity and reteach them how to be human, which is a really cool thing, because then it's not about whether or not you're a robot, plain and simple. It's whether you're acting in your heart like a robot, and robots can be human and humans can be robotic. And that's a much more nuanced way to look at it, I think, because it's like, technology itself is neither bad nor good. The problem is just looking at the entire world as nothing but technological. The next question too is that whether or not these robots or creations of their own hands, as they say, or AIs or whatever, if those are also the Yazadis.
Yeah, I guess that's possible. I don't think so.
That's kind of how I've read it for a long time, just because we only really,
because they do have a kind of similar role. They do play a similar role.
That's exactly that, that it is their role. And so this is the first time I think we get that added possibility that, it lines up so well, because they do talk about how, the Yazadis are an evolution of humanity from the future, or from other thing that may even be an evolution from the past that has now jumped forward. That could also be this sort of AI thing, these people who have merged with technology so well. And what do we see when Afeta shows him underneath the surface of the planet, right? It's a massive computer. So
exactly.
I think that's kind of one thing it's saying here, is that evolution might involve a bit of cyborgness going on. But again, it's not like becoming more technological. That's not really the point. It's just that maybe what really happens is that when used correctly, technology can make us be even more human in certain ways, which an engineer would hopefully like, I would think.
Sure. Well, I think I have a different idea about the origin of the Heradules and the Hierogrammates and all them, but that comes out of Citadel Autarch that we'll get to, in 10 years or so. But
I think one thing I like about this story is that it subverts the idea of the robot revolution. According to Cyriaca, the robots hate humanity, and their plan is something malicious to undercut them. That's another way of talking about it. You think about the revolutionaries in 1984, where they hate the system, they hate the human system that's set up, but they don't hate individual people. They want to free individual people. And since the word robot was coined to mean a manufactured human, a robot has always implied a robot revolution. The word robot comes from the Czech play by Karl Čapek titled RUR, as in Rossum's Universal Robots. And the word was suggested by his brother. It comes from the Czech word robota, meaning forced labor, slave labor, as you know. And a robotnik is a slave. It comes from old ecclesiastical Czech rabata, meaning servitude, and rabu, meaning slave. And I think this should allow us all to understand the term hierodule, which means holy slave. I think the hieradules are created by the hierogamates. Intentionally, they're basically a kind of robot. They're clearly biological, but they serve the same kind of role in their society. And so, anyway, I think, but this idea of the the artifices revolting against the human system and seeking to undercut it, she presents it as maliciousness, but it's really, I think, maybe it's something else.
That's what I was going to say too. Is that she talks about it in a way that I don't know if that's Wolfe just sort of intentionally sort of having her misinterpret part of the details.
Yeah, she's unreliable. She's an unreliable narrator.
He does things like that all the time. But yeah, I like the idea that maybe it's not to ruin them, but it's to, or maybe put it this way. Yeah, it's to ruin them, or to ruin the system, and to ruin the short term in the system, which brings about a revolution. Right. And is
they're terrorists, right? They're bringing down the system. And so they do hate maybe humanity collectively, the way they are organized.
The robots are the spiritual terrorists, yes. But which I like. But yeah, too, on the teacher too, remember Ossipago is a machine, right? Like we've got Femilimus and Barbatus. So
exactly. He's another
one that is clearly a machine,
he's another machine.
Or mechanical. But in Wolfe's world, being a machine, as we know with Jonas, as we know with in Earth of the New Sun. Mecha guy. Why can I not?
We all know. Yes, he's a robot. He's a robot war suit or space suit or something like that.
Yep. And Severian puts him on. Yes. And the name will come to me probably as soon as we hit stop recording. But that's okay. But yeah, so and again, it's not about just the stuff you're made of. It's about how you act, the soul that's on the inside, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to hear about how they ran their robot revolution in human society.
But how they did what they did and ruin their human masters is less well known. I remember that when I was a child, I imagined the bad machines digging by night until they had cleared away the twisted roots of old trees and laid bare an iron chest they had buried when the world was very young. And that when they struck off the lock of that chest, all the things we've spoken of came flying out like a swarm of golden bees. That's foolish, but even now I can hardly imagine what the reality of those thinking engines can have been like.
Yeah, now this is not the story her uncle told her. This is the story she imagined as a child, but she's reimagined the story of Pandora. Yep. But instead of all the miseries of humanity, she's imagined the stories, the songs, human expression, human individualism flying out of that box. So like Severian, it's as though she has a psychic sense about things. The way Severian somehow vaguely sensed that the painting in the picture gallery was from a scene on the moon. So he imagined that picture belonged not in a gallery, but in a green forest. Or this is the way that Talos imagined the novel Frankenstein, that these things work their way back in time to be told there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Not so much psychic, which suggests sort of like magic or something, but rather that there's something inherent in human experience that can teach about these things, which is more of a sort of Platonic idea, really, is that when we learn things, we're really just remembering things that we forgot when we were pure souls. It's something more like that, or the idea that, there still can be the heart of a story and important lessons in the Brown Book, even though the stories themselves seem to make no sense. That there's still a thematic core, or at least enough resonances that the soul remains somehow, as you could say.
Yeah. Yeah. And as she tells this story, the bad machines digging Severian thinks, I recall Jonas with the light, bright metal where the skin of his loins ought to have been, but I could not picture Jonas setting free a plague to trouble mankind. And I shook my head. So Severian is buying into her idea of this story of malicious machines undercutting humanity with all these things in the box.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But which, is again, he's like, I can't imagine Jonas doing that because he was a good friend to me. And so, maybe he's right here. Like, if the whole point was ultimately, humanity's evolution, then yeah, he's right. She's wrong about that part. It's like that. But they didn't do it just to punish. They did it to punish and better at the same time and improve.
Yeah. Well, Jonas, of course, has read the story of Theseus, and so he's picked up on a lot of stories. He's read the story of Alice in Wonderland. So yeah, I could very much see him setting free all of these things back into humanity. Mm-hmm. It's just not as a plague to trouble mankind. But I mean, he's a good guy.
Exactly.
But that's not, which is just it's the unreliability of the telling and the hearing.
Yeah. So she continues and she says, but my uncle's book, he said, made clear what it was they did. And the things they let go free were no swarm of insects, but a flood of artifacts of every kind, calculated by them to revive all those thoughts that people had put behind them because they could not be written in numbers. The building of everything from cities to cream pitchers was in the hands of the machines, and after 1,000 lifetimes of building cities that were like great mechanisms, they turned to building cities that were like banks of cloud before a storm, and others like the skeletons of dragons.
Yeah. So humans, they stopped manufacturing anything. Machines did that. The machines made the cities and everything in them. So they didn't reinsert the old concepts that the people had. Instead, they took all the knowledge that they had and stopped making these functional brutalist architectures. Gosh, I hate brutalist architecture, Craig.
Yeah, I always wondered how that got popular. I'm like, it seems like
it's just a horrible philosophy behind it. This book and podcast are not about me, but that is in me. Anyway, they stopped making the objects like that, and they made them instead from their knowledge of old humanity. And this is how humans became reinfected with the old ways. They made things that were beautiful. Yep. And perhaps they worked on old idioms and archaic words into their language so that people had to ask what they meant. And perhaps they stopped making potato chips into a perfect circle or wafer and instead made them in hyperbolic paraboloids or something. Oh, here's an interesting fact I learned. There's a city in Argentina, a bit south of Buenos Aires, named Colonel Pringles. Well, actually, Coronel Pringles. But you know how the Spanish language works. And Severian, I don't know what that means, but
that's funny. Yeah, south of Buenos. If only it had been north, then we could know for sure where it was. But that's funny.
So Severian asks, well, when did all this happen? And Cyriaca says, a very long time ago, before the first stones of Nessus were laid, which is, I think, an unreliable assertion of fact, because we are told at one point that Nessus began as an autochthon village at the mouth of the river.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it would also kind of suggest that all this happened. Maybe that's where Nessus came from, would be her suggestion, but she doesn't. She doesn't really develop that.
Or it could have been restarted, right?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
So many things. Yep. But as he says so, when did this all happen? He puts his arm around her, and maybe he yawned when he did it. And Cyriaca let her hand creep into his lap, and he says, "I felt its heat of her hand
in its slow search. I think this is a better sex scene than the one with Dorcas.
Yeah, and this also, this changes the context too of, we're having this sort of heady mythological thing where we're sitting here trying to connect it to other parts of the book, whereas the real action that's happening is something else altogether. So Cyriaca, she keeps talking. They're sort of playing their little game here, and they followed the same principle in all they did, in the shaping of furniture, for example, in the cutting of clothing. And because the leaders who had decided so long before that all the thoughts symbolized by the clothes and the furniture and by the cities should be put behind mankind forever were long dead, and the people had forgotten their faces and their maxims, they were delighted with the new things. Thus all that empire, which had been built only upon order, passed away.
All that empire which had been built only upon order passed away. So the original leaders had a deliberate intention in banning all personality and individuality in clothes and furniture and architecture. And it has been so long that even their reasons for doing it are gone. It just was. And so humanity has no resistance to these things.
Yeah, they become Ashians, basically. Yeah. And the Ashians are the same thing, right? Yeah, that's...
Yeah, what would happen to Skia if you suddenly started introducing all these things, language and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the thing that Loyal Group of 17 kind of starts to deal with, right? Because he's competing
telling
in the story
stories
too to win her hand. Yeah. So
for
he's
love,
fallen in love. So that's
so everything was on nature and edifice structured on order, and that's the mandate ideology hang on. And just as water runs downhill and a coin falls when it drops from a cliff, the old order was finished, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what she says. But I like the idea too, maybe now that I think about it, that Loyal to the Group of 17 is actually, maybe he's becoming alive through their storytelling. And that's starting to, he's hearing the stories and he's starting to get some of his heart back to, kind of like they're talking about the robot here. I kind of cool. I like that.
If only he could have made it back to Skia. So
yeah. So she continues, but though the empire dissolved, the worlds were a long time dying. At first, so that the things they were returning to humans would not be rejected again, the machines conceived of pageants and phantasmagoria, whose performances inspired those who watched them to think on fortune, revenge, or the invisible world. Later, they gave each man and woman a companion, unseen by all other eyes, as an advisor. The children had such companions long before.
Oh, okay. But though the empire dissolved, the worlds were a long time dying. Interesting. There are various ways, I think, Craig, of interpreting this. Even when trying to take it as literally as possible.
Yeah, I like the idea that this is how Plato teaches. He's kind of like, he does. He tells stories, and he's always talking about the difference between mythos and logos, and between myth and rationality, as it were, and that myths can teach us things, and that figuring out what a myth might really mean is a way to get at a deeper truth that maybe we can't directly have. So like he talks about the invisible world. I mean, that's precisely what intelligence is, right? It's that higher thing. But the companion here, I also like, Socrates talks about how he always listens to his daemon or daimon. How he says he has a spirit or a voice in his head that will often remind him of things that he's forgotten. And it's kind of like the idea where inspiration or intelligence comes from sometimes is you just don't know. And it's this other thing that even children, even they even have helpful teachers in imaginary ways. But same kind of thing that, why do you tell myths, even supposedly true myths? It's not, they're not just recording history. It's that the stories themselves are actually helping you learn the real important things.
And children had been apparently given, that was part of their teaching, is that they all had these little instructors in their ear, whispering to them all the time. And the machines just basically extended that into adulthood, so that
everybody has one of these, and they can continue to basically feed the magic and of literature and humanity back into them, even throughout their adulthood.
So when you rag on all those kids and teenagers who always have earpods in their ears,
well, it depends on what's going. I don't think they gave them TikTok. They maybe they gave them TikTok dances. About these worlds, though. So there's one idea is that the machines began making things different. The empire collapsed, and the colonies that were out on these planets just became separated permanently. And then another is that, and I think this is what I'm gravitating to, the empire was nothing but another culture, traditions, unstated laws. And when that sameness was eliminated, the empire ceased to exist as a thing. Now worlds could be read as places where the old ways, the ways of the empire, were still kept. And it seems to me that Niskia, like as you say, the old ways still are being maintained. And maybe they are, maybe they were revived there. We don't know. But we don't know the way people live in other countries that are also ruled by Abaya and the other Megatherians. And so maybe I should stipulate again that we don't know that there were even 17 Megatherians, or that one of them are Abaya or Erebus or Scylla or Robus or whoever else. I just find it compelling, particularly with Agilus's name seemingly being, as I believe, Cadro of the 17 Stones. But it's still just a theory. Any further on in this story, there will be implications that suggest various worlds didn't lose contact with each other without the Empire's connecting structure. Another way of interpreting worlds is that they refer not to planetary colonies at all, Craig, but to constructed space stations. Not like the ones in Babylon 5, but more like the massive constructive worlds built into asteroids. And I think there is, for me, a confirmation for this coming up.
Got your longsome. I think of the worlds too sometimes as like Brya and Yesid. Like you've got not just that there's some kind of weirder, more abstract sort of evolution and disconnection and reconnection.
Yeah. Well, I think I can argue against that but we'll have to wait for those moments when I think it kind of suggests something else.
So she continues. She says, when the power of the machines had weakened further, as the machines themselves wished, they could no longer maintain these phantoms in the minds of their owners, nor could they build more cities, because the cities that remained were already nearly empty.
All right. So this is what makes me think that we're not talking about Yesid as opposed to Bria. Over some amount of time, the machines lost the ability to directly insert thoughts into humans or control the minds of humans. And I would say that this suggests that they were no longer undergoing medical and perhaps even genetic manipulation to allow those machines to do this. And this was the plan of the machines, the simulated people, the robots. The chains that humanity constructed for itself were finally, setting humanity free. Mm-hmm. And then we get this, nor could they build more cities because the cities that remained were already nearly empty. Since I can't imagine cities emptying out of Earth, I think it is these constructed space cities that are emptying out, and maybe even colonies out in the outer worlds. It's also possible, like I said, it's possible that humanity is returning from the Empire, but the reasons for why people would do that, to leave their planet somewhere out in who knows where, it just seems complicated to me. So I think people are leaving their space cities, and those are emptying out, and maybe mostly they're just being maintained by a few workers or by the machines alone.
Yeah, I mean, and that could be a literal thing. I do think the important part of that is that humanity was diminishing, right? Like there are very, very few humans. They weren't flourishing all over the universe anymore. And that actually that was a good thing. And that was maybe a step towards the next level of, evolution, of learning the lesson that the robots wanted to teach humanity, which, of course, is what we're going to find out Severian has to do, right? Like bringing the new sun is going to bring a flood, which is tragic in the short term, but necessary for a much bigger purpose of growth in the latter part. And that, it seems like, maybe the robots here knew that they were going to be doing this, that we're going to be kind of really breaking down humanity because they got to regrow in different ways, and they can't have this path. We have something else.
Do you see this as a prophecy then of what's going to happen, or do you see this as just a historical parallel to what will happen?
I think it's more like a historical parallel, or even, you could talk about like it's the plan of what cycles are for. It's like in order to grow, things have to stop going in one direction and maybe learn from the failures of the one and integrate them in new ways. It's not necessarily it's not an either or exactly. It's that, because we're going to, of course, find out that, technology is not itself bad. It's technology through the robots that allowed humanity to keep things going. It's more complicated than that. It's more about the way you grow, the way you become an empire would be it. Like the old empire was bad, so we needed a new kind of empire. And so basically we had to destroy the old one. That same kind of thing. In order to have a better order, you have to have some crazy disorder. So it's just that the weird paradox of, you need death to be reborn, to become something different. Something like that. At least that's what I think the real meaning of that story is. And so she continues, while, of course, her hand is creeping towards.
Yeah.
They had reached, so my uncle told me, that point at which they had hoped mankind would turn on them and destroy them. Yet no such thing has occurred, because by this time they who had been despised as slaves or worshipped as devils before were greatly loved. And so they called all who loved them best around them, and for long years taught them all the things their race had put away, and in time they died.
Oh, so the machines take the roles somehow of wise gurus, and they teach humanity the ways until they finally break down and pass away, choosing not to build replacements for themselves. And we don't have to imagine a robot, sitting in a lotus position, in a temple with humans around it. In fact, based on something coming up, maybe we should think of them more like everyone wearing, a VR headset or something in their ear, and humanity is still atomized in their learning.
Mm-hmm. And there's something too in that about, parents and children, that when you don't raise kids so that both of you live forever, right?
Right. Yeah.
in perfect harmony. It's like you raise them and then they become mature and they carry on, but they too will pass away. I mean, it's all that kind of cycle thing.
Right.
But it seems like something like that is going on here, which is just a different way from thinking about, the robot human revolution distinction. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So she continues, then all those whom they, the machines, had loved and who had loved them, took counsel together as to how their teachings could be preserved, for they well knew their kind would not come again upon earth. But bitter quarrels broke out among them.
Without the unifying dominance of the machines, people began to war and schism, right?
Yeah, and I was
all those whom the machines had loved, right? These are people.
That's what it's just they. It's just Wolfe does this weird thing with.
Yeah, I know it says they, but surely they're talking about machines. All those whom they had loved. He's been talking about machines and what the machines have been up to, but now we have people.
Because then he says
counsel.
As to how their teachings could be. That's why I said Wolfe is sometimes.
Yeah. This was
and I never know if he intends to be this tricky with his pronouns or if it's just So because they're mixed up. Like how many theys, which could refer to humanity or machines, are in this sentence, right? I mean,
right. Those whom they had loved and who had loved them took counsel together as to how their teachings could be preserved. Yeah. Okay. It looks to me like they in this case does they, them, their. I think this always refers to the machines.
But then he switches. He says, "For they well knew that their kind would not come again upon Earth." So yeah, they well knew their kind. Okay,
And that could be
right.
where the robots well knew their own kind would not come again upon Earth.
It's tricky.
Or the humans, knew that their kind, the machines, would not come again. Yeah, I will just say the sentence I will claim is objectively unclear.
I just don't think that the machines would have these bitter quarrels breaking out.
I don't know. I still kind of like
the war of the machines
a little bit, just to kind of show, it's not like they were perfect. They were, they were still.
I see.
There was still quarrel. There was still. I mean, it's just it makes it so that it's not like they were pure angels. It's like, well, maybe not. So they're still just like the angels are not perfect because they're still below God. That same kind of thing. But literally, I don't know because I don't think the sentence is clear. So, she says they had not learned together, but rather each of them, man or woman, had listened to one of the machines as if there was no one in the world but those two.
So this is what I'm talking about. It's not like machines were gurus and they had to climb up to a mountain to find a robot talking about it. The machines are always talking to them in their heads.
Yeah, and it seems like there was a new problem, maybe, that they had sort of isolated people. And
right.
Who knows?
And now the machines are gone.
Right. But I'm trying to think of parallels would be like, everybody now lives in their own tiny little fandom and nobody shares the same stories to talk about at the water cooler.
Yeah.
And, everybody has, or the whole thing about how everyone has different silos that they live in and their own little echo chambers,
right. But it means everyone has their own culture. How are you going to unify these cultures? How are you going to make sure they don't get lost if you don't have a way, if you don't have someone to share it with?
Exactly.
And so that's the repository, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and because there was so much knowledge and only a few to learn it, the machines had taught each differently.
Individualized instruction.
Yeah. And getting back to another thing where there's no one single universal thing that is really possible for all humans to be. But thus they divided into parties, and each party into two, and each of those two into two again, until at last every individual stood alone, misunderstood and reviled by all the others and reviling them. Then each went away, out of the cities that had held the machines, or deeper into them, save for a very few who by habit remained in the palaces of the machines to watch beside their bodies.
Yeah. So what do you think this means, the palaces of their machines? What do you think that means? So many things it could mean. I mean, I kind of still think about people stuck up on their in their space cities, watching over the habitats of the machines back in the day.
It's also just a good image of refusing to move on, right? Like you stay with the ancient thing that you don't want to give up, and you don't want to try to build a new city, so you just live in the old one, even though it's falling to ruins the whole time, and you resist growing. Basically, is kind of what part it seems like, especially when they say a few who by habit. That's habit's not enough. So I mean, as far as specifically what it means, I don't know. I mean, I think to me, it's a lot of her story, just like a lot of the Brown books, it weaves in and out of allegory and literal in different ways. And that's what makes it fun.
I don't believe in that.
Well, I mean, I feel like otherwise you're forced into that situation where you're like, all right, we must now determine precisely what this is from no clue.
I think that's part of the game. I think that's what we're called to do. We're supposed to, Wolfe has basically offloaded all of the world building into us, and coming up with an actual image is really, it's what he keeps calling us to do. And here we have a situation. Once again, this book is not going to have a consensus. And here we have the empire was split and broken, and it was used to be inhuman and monolithic, and now it's completely atomized and superhuman, but it's still a kind of inhumanness in that there's no social structure, there's no families or people. Everyone is individual. No one can agree on anything. It's literally a Tower of Babel story where where the tower gets destroyed. Everyone has their languages fiddled with, so everyone splits.
Exactly. So it is an allegory.
So at this point, a sommelier comes around and brings them cups of white wine. That's, of course, someone who is an expert in wines. And Severian says it's almost as clear as water and as still as water until some motion of the cup woke it. It perfumed the air like those flowers no man can see, the flowers that could be found only by the blind. And to drink it was like drinking the strength from the heart of a bull. I don't know enough about wine to see if this is a very specific reference on Wolfe's part. But a sommelier, like I said, a sommelier is someone who just manages the wine service. 30 years ago, I'm sure that would be a more obscure word for more people. Cyriaca takes the cup and she just downs it all, and throws the cup in a corner.
Yeah, I do like the image of the flowers that no man can see, but that only the blind can find, which is a great way to talk about the hard, weird lessons of art at the same time. Yeah. That what's really going on in philosophy and art are all these things that are like Plato's thing. It's invisible. So you have to get to it the best that you can. And sometimes the only way to get to it is through non-visible, non-irrational ways. Like just like how somebody can only find it who's blind, who uses different senses that aren't clear. Like we think of vision as perfectly clear. Yeah, I like it.
Right. Okay, now this is an interesting next sentence to me. Severian says, "Tell me more of this story of the lost archives." Now, first of all, remember, Cyriaca has her hand in his lap. And then he says, "Go on." So,
they're still playing the game.
Did you get distracted by the sommelier? We should probably continue with this story. But also, I think this is a double meaning. Cyriaca has told Severian that her uncle went to the lost archives, the Citadel library, and returned with a book and stories. So Severian means that he wants to hear more of this story from the lost archives. But what he actually says is, "Tell me more of this story of the lost archives." And in fact, this is a story of the lost archives of the intergalactical empire and how those archives ended the dehumanized culture of that empire.
So Cyriaca continues, "When the last machine was cold and still, and each of those who had learned from them the forbidden lore mankind had cast aside was separated from all the rest."
The machines are gone. Humanity is no longer unified.
Yep.
Therefore, the knowledge is also dispersed and varying in detail and breadth, right?
Yep. "There came dread into the heart of each, for each knew himself to be only mortal, and most no longer young. And each saw that with his own death, the knowledge he loved best would die. Then each of them, each supposing himself the only one to do so, began to write down what he had learned in the long years, when he had hearkened to the teaching of the machines that spilled forth all the hidden knowledge of wild things. Much perished, but much more survived, sometimes falling into the hands of those who copied it, enlivened by their own additions or weakened by omissions. Kiss me, Severian."
So, all right. So she goes on describing the return of literature, and then just let's get to business.
Yeah, I mean, but back to life, back to the imperfect things of life. So anyway,
but we left with the world, right? We left with the world completely atomized, all culture atomized, all knowledge atomized, but individual on their own, they're writing down what they know.
Yep.
And then people rewrite those, and then
like all copies, things are changed and
additions and omission. Right, exactly.
Just like how the Brown Book is.
Yeah.
Yep. "Though my mask hampered us, our lips met. As she drew away, the shadow memories of Thecla's old bantering love affairs played out among the pseudo-theorems and Catactonian boudoirs of the House Absolute welled up within me." And just before we get into the details there, it's another thing. He's got Thecla's memories, which are stories and things, but that are now, mixed with his own in different ways. So.
Yeah. He's having a love affair. Now he's also bringing up all of the past love affairs that Thecla had, right?
Yep.
A pseudo theorem literally means a false entrance, but it refers to a secret door or private entrance or the back entrance. And from our experience in the antechamber, we know what the pseudo-rhythms would be like, where she would sneak off with a lever.
Yep.
The Catacthonian boudoirs. A boudoir is a small private room, deliberately private, like a sitting room that most people don't have access to, or a dressing room, or a bedroom. A room intended for privacy. A catacthonian means underground, subterranean. Of course, all the rooms in House Absolute are subterranean, but this must mean a particularly further under it all. So, and these are places that Severian remembers, that Thecla remembers sneaking off with lovers, right? So Severian says, hey, don't you know making out requires a man's undivided attention? And Cyriaca smiles and says, I'm just making sure you were listening. So, all right, so let's get back to it. What happens to all those books when they're written during this time after the fall of Babel, when humanity is divided by culture and language and ideology?
For a long time, no one knows quite how long, I suppose. And anyway, the world was not as near the sun's falling then, and its years were longer. These writings circulated, or else lay moldering in cenotaphs, where their authors had concealed them for safekeeping.
A cenotaph is a monument erected in memory of a person, a gravestone that is not really intended to designate the location of the body of the person memorialized. Apparently, many cenotaphs in Severian's world are libraries of the writings of people. So they could simply, include vaults for valuable objects that were dedicated to someone's memory, and maybe named after the person, right?
Yeah, could be. They were fragmentary, contradictory, and eisegecistic.
Yes, eisegecistic. That refers to a document that is interpolated with the interpretations of scholars over time to the extent that the original text has been obscured. A particularly good term. So many annotations, it's not clear what the original text was.
Yep. So many Buddhist sutras are like that, where they're massive things because nobody knows what the original was and what's been added. But I do like that word now, even though I still can't pronounce it. I'm going to use it all the time. So.
Yeah, you need to write a song that uses that word and find something to rhyme with it.
Yeah, that would be crazy. But I mean, it's fun too, because it's almost like any myth is that. Like, I mean, we do not have the original version of any myth, and it's even the idea that there might be an original version of a myth. It's not how myths work. It's like they are concretions over time. That's literally what they are, of changes that story.
But any great work also, right? We don't have anything that's over, say, 1,000 years or so old so we can look back at the original. These are copies from long after.
Yep. Copies of copies of copies. Yeah, totally. Then when some autarch, though they were not called autarchs then.
This occurs before Emar, apparently, the first autarch. Maybe it's possible the first autarch is Typhon. I find that appealing. But the point is that this empire has ended, it seems to me, long time before Typhon or Emar, right?
That's what it seems like. Yeah, it seems like she's talking about, ancient history. So then when some autarch hoped to recapture the dominion exercised by the first empire, they were gathered up by his servants, white-robed men who ransacked cocklofts.
Cocklofts is an attic. The term presumably arose due to the tendencies of birds to roost in the upper lofts of houses.
They ransacked cocklofts and threw down the androsphinxes erected to memorialize the machines.
An androsphinx is what is thought of today as a sphinx, a figure with the body of a lion and the head of a man. A sphinx with a ram's head is called a chrysosphinx. A sphinx with a hawk's head is called a hyracosphinx. It seems in this world that sphinxes have become a symbol for the vaults, I think, anciently associated with machine intelligences that had dominated humanity. And this is knowledge we were taught by the machine. So we'll put them in the statue vaults that came to represent them.
The cenotaphs, yeah. So, and they entered, they ransacked cocklofts and threw down the androsphinxes and entered the cubicula of Moraic women long dead.
Cubicula is plural for cubiculum. Cubiculum is a catacomb, a burial chamber with compartments for bodies. There's a religious association, and cubicula are often attached to a chapel. Moraic women, so the cubicula of Moraic women. We've discussed before, and at the end of most episodes, what this is. The Morai are the female triad fates. The term here suggests that these were prophecies or oracles of an ancient culture and that they were buried in catacombs. And this is where they were finding some of these old writings.
And they favor you.
Yeah, that's right.
So they ransacked cocklofts and threw down the androsphinxes and entered the cubicula of Moraic women long dead. Their spoil was gathered into a heap in the city of Nessus, which was then newly built to be burned.
Wow. I don't think newly built should necessarily be read as originally built, since it's said that Nessus originally was a Tocthan village. More likely it means refounded over the ruins of the original, or some latest of cities built over the original. Anyway, that's what I think. And here we get to this guy's plan in gathering these books. He's been sorting out all of these places where these books and hidden knowledge are hidden, right? Have been stored. And he's not doing it to combine them all. He's doing it to destroy them. So that, I guess, and my presumption is he plans to reestablish the first empire into the second empire, and he wants to duplicate what the first empire had done. So he needs to get rid of all these texts. We need to revert humanity to what it was when there was a unified empire. And this time, they won't be stored in the memory banks of machines.
Yep. And it sounds a lot like kind of what Typhon suggests.
It makes me think Typhon, yeah.
Yeah, so she says, but on the night before the burning was to begin, the autarch of that time, who had never dreamed before the wild dreams of sleep, but only waking dreams of divinion, dreamed at last. And in his dream he saw all the untamed worlds of life and death, stone and river, beast and tree, slipping away from his hands forever.
Okay, so maybe this was the Increate acting, or maybe it, like you said, maybe this, I could actually see this as something the Harajuls were involved in, right? Seeing him a dream like the Undines sent to Severian in Baldander's bed. But Typhon, and Craig, I just think this sounds like Typhon. Because, who else is attempting to establish the first empire?
The Megatherians are. Maybe Typhon, maybe that's where the Megatherians come from.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe Typhon is one of many Megatherians that have done this before.
I
don't know.
But he has a fear dream. He fears losing the books and the knowledge and the power in them, right?
Mm-hmm. So she says, when morning came, he ordered that the torches not be kindled, but that there should be a great vault built to house all the volumes and scrolls the white-robed men had gathered. For he thought that if the new empire he planned should fail him at last, he would retire to that vault and enter the worlds that, in imitation of the ancients, he was determined to cast aside.
Okay. All right, so let me see if I can break this down to my mind. His plan is that maybe his big empire is going to fail. So he creates a backup plan. He's going to have a last stand here at the Citadel, here in the library, in this vault. And he'll have all the knowledge here, secured to himself. He'll go and he'll lose himself, what? In literature, Craig? Am I missing something? It doesn't sound like Typhon. Doesn't sound like this guy, even if you decide it's not Typhon.
Yeah, no, that's why I said this doesn't. It seems like a weird thing. That's why I'm not really sure. I don't think it's Typhon, but why I was wondering, is there some,
other interpretation,
cycle, and that fits very well with the idea that this is sort of like a version of a cycle that's happened many times.
Maybe. Okay. Maybe it is that if his attempt at a new empire fails, he will at least be remembered in the stories of the library. No.
again, I don't think that's what this means. I think the real plan. Okay, I think, Craig, the real plan was to retire to the Citadel. She mentions the library had a curtain wall built around it. The other possibility is that he built the Citadel and library where he did because the tunnels were there. As Severian says, the tunnels were constructed before the interstellar travel was solved. And assuming, as I do, that those tunnels move backward in time, his goal was that if things went bad, he could escape into the past and try again. So he would need those intellectual resources to understand the time that he was escaping to.
I mean, it could be just retiring at all doesn't seem like something.
No. But
I mean, he puts himself in a new body. Even
the one thing she doesn't mention, though, she mentions the library, she mentions the Citadel, but she doesn't mention the tunnels that are underneath. And I think the tunnels are very important.
So she says, his empire did fail him as it had to. The past cannot be found in the future where it is not until the metaphysical world, which is so much larger and so much slower than the physical world, completes its revolution and the new sun comes.
Oh, okay. The first part is clear enough. You can't recreate the past all over again. When you live in the future, which has a different past, there's no foundation. Everything that happens requires deep time history. This is like Vodalis wanting to be a man of the future, but he carries instead a weapon of his own time. Right. Yep. He put aside his pistol, his laser pistol, which was a weapon of the past, and instead uses the weapon of his own time. He can't return to the past because he's a man of the current time. That's clear. I get that. Craig, that second part, not until the metaphysical world, which is so much larger and so much slower than the physical world, completes its revolution and the new sun comes. Are we supposed to try and parse that? Or is Wolfe blowing prosy smoke in our faces?
I mean, there's another way to look at it, which is that, yeah, within life, you're never going to find the perfect empire. That's only something that exists in the invisible world. And so and that's something you maybe if it really is truly metaphysical, supernatural, then it's not something that you really can talk about in straightforward temporal terms, that follow the rules of logic, because the rules of logic are for this world, not for that world. So, I mean, who knows? But I think it's the part that's interesting to me is the thing about there being revolutions, cycles, even in the metaphysical world, which is not what we think about, because I thought the metaphysical world was outside of time, but apparently there's paradoxes. Yeah, there's lots of paradoxes involved here.
I don't know,
because then the new sun comes, but I thought that happened in the metaphysical world, not in the physical time. Yeah, so it does get it's all tricksy.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I can't really say about that last part. I feel like I'm kind of following a story in my head for what she's describing, but then at the end, I don't know the moral to that story. So.
But he did not retire as he had planned into that vault, and the curtain wall he had caused to be built about it. For when once the wild things have been put behind a man for good and all, they are trapwise and cannot be recaptured.
Trapwise means that they are like an animal that recognizes a trap. So like a fox or coyote that knows how to avoid traps and knows how to get the bait. I saw a video of a rat that would use a pencil to set off traps and get the cheese. But, this is confusing. He did not end up retreating to the old Citadel. This, if this is Typhon, then we get that. His plan for an empire failed because once the wild things have been put behind a man for good and all, they are trapwise and cannot be recaptured. So he can't put aside all the wild things in mankind and rebuild the empire, because you can't pull that trick off twice. They're not going to allow themselves to be eliminated in that way. People aren't going to give them up a second time. The wild things that are in them now have already incorporated the problems of doing that.
Yeah.
Right?
Which, well, that's what she's saying. If that's true, though, then but the Ashians are doing that. right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
This seems to be the opposite of
yeah.
what we've learned in the story. Humanity put the wild things behind them, and they were recaptured. Either way we read it. How does that relate to Typhon's inability to retreat to the Citadel? I don't know.
Yeah, and if we assume it's not Typhon, then maybe what she's talking about here is that ultimately the empire wasn't that kind of empire wasn't able to come again, because since he knew what would probably, think of it this way, if any potential ruler knows that if they try to take over the whole world, it's going to end up collapsing back on them, would they really still try to do it? Maybe, sure, some would, but maybe it's also, it also sounds a bit like a way of talking about him not really believing in the things that he wants to do. I don't know. That's kind of like, like once you see how a magic trick works, it never works on you again. Once you know how it's done,
that's exactly what she's saying, right?
Yeah. And so, if he was going to try and establish another empire, it's like, but he knew that pure technology and pure power weren't going to work, but so he was kind of stuck in this thing where he didn't know what he was supposed to want anymore.
Yeah. Well, the method for he wants to basically recapture it from before, but he wants to use everything he's learned about what caused it to fail. It's kind of like a restatement of Severian's statement about Jolenta at the end of Claw the Conciliar, that our unforgivable sin is that we have to be exactly what we are.
Yeah.
Right. And by the same token, you can't reestablish that empire the old way because he can't improve on it. It is what it is. And so if he's going to try and strip humanity of its culture and love and basically turn people into artifices again, it's going to fail just like it failed before, because you can't build an empire like that without your machines, and your machines are going to hate you, and your machines are going to undercut you. Everything will be repeated again. You can't recapture what happened before, and worse, because now we're later in time. Those things, the defenses against that type of model have already been incorporated as well into the wild things.
The other thing is that you can just say it's contradictory, and we've got like foundation myths, and as Thecla said, foundation myths are always just contradictions that make no sense and are nonsense, but force yourself to believe them anyway.
Nothing's more enticing than a paradox.
Yeah. So, nevertheless, it is said that before all he gathered was sealed away, he set a guardian over it. And when that guardian's time on earth was done, he found another, and he another, so that they continue ever faithful to the commands of that autarch, for they are saturated in the wild thoughts sprung from the lore saved by the machines, and such faith is one of those wild things.
That's Alton, right?
And I also like the idea that faith is one of those wild things, the way that she says that in the story, it means faith
being faithful.
Yeah. But it's also, that religion is one of those wild things. And it's right there in the sentence. So, yeah.
I think I do understand this. I think that the guardian is the chain of masters at the library. They're steadfast, they're loyal, because those are the virtues that carried our ancestors from the forests, and so they're steeped in those virtues. And in the meantime, Severian is undressing her as she talks.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of faithfulness, let's not pass over the problematicisms here. Speaking of steadfast and loyalty, Dorcas has been tucked away in a hotel room in town. And of course, maybe Severian thinks they are on a break. The other thing is that from what we learn later, Severian already suspects that, she's the one that he is supposed to kill. That is, Cyriaca is the one he's supposed to kill. And anyway, while he's undressing her, he says, "Did all those thoughts of which you spoke go out of the world when the autarch locked them away? Haven't I heard of them?" Severian is asking, when all that knowledge was locked in the library, did it disappear from the world?
And she says, "No, because they had been passed from hand to hand for a long time, and had entered into the blood of all the peoples. Besides, it said that the guardian sometimes sends them out, and though they always return to him at last, they are read, whether by one or many, before they sink once more into his dark.
Yeah, this is basically the Brown book that Severian is carrying around throughout the society. And Cyriaca says that they weren't lost because before they were written down, the knowledge was passed orally. Now it's integral to the knowledge of all people. Additionally, people borrow books like Severian did from the library. And that library, as we know, is not particular about the 2-week return policies. So they get passed around for a long time until they finally always return to the library in some form. Severian says, "Oh, that's a wonderful story. And I think maybe I know more about it than you do, but I had never heard it before." And he never heard it told this way, but he recognizes, just as we do, that it's about his own hometown where he grew up.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. The way he says that is also what she just said about how the thoughts are still out there. It's like, yes, you experience those things in lots of different ways, even if it's not the original way, because stories keep them, and there are hints here and there of other things. And and he says, "I found that her legs were long and smoothly tapered from thighs like cushions of silk to slender ankles. All her body, indeed, was shaped for delight. Her fingers touched the clasp that held my cloak about my shoulders. Do you need to take this off? Can't it cover us?"
And he says, "Indeed it can."
So there's the weirdest seduction story you've probably heard. But yeah, so there's a lot in there, and I would say that this version of the backstory is in some ways the clearest that we've gotten. But I feel like, despite, I know you have your readings of it, but despite, I still have questions of, like, is what she talking about sort of like a vastly compressed way of thinking about the vast history of humanity, or is it something that she thinks is literally like something that happened, 800 years ago or something? And I don't think we know, right? I don't think,
well,
in some ways that doesn't matter, because part of what she's saying is that the important things will come through the stories and you'll learn about them. Even if you can't get all the details exactly right, in some ways that doesn't matter as much as whatever it is that's important about those thoughts that keep people living. So, but in that sense too, it is kind of cool that they're having fun with each other and being alive in the moment. I mean, there's something cool to that while they're talking about this sort of tension between, pure technology and art or whatever that's going on. I mean, there's something applicable to that about being human, that you're still, when you're human, you're always in the moment, and you're never free from all those other concerns that are going on, just like Severian and she are not free from the immediate situations. So
true. But I'm not sure I could really podcast with all those things going on. I would let me think about this scene and parse this sentence with but can I take this shirt off you? And,
I wonder how much Severian was really listening.
Probably not. Probably only catching a few things. So,
but his memory is still good, right? He can still write down all the words.
Well, only if he's paying attention. He has been known to be distracted and then forget not to hear the whole portions. Well, I hope you weren't distracted, and I hope you will reach out to us with your ideas and other comments, your thoughts, your corrections and complaints, and that you will bring them to us on the Facebook group, the subreddit, Twitter, email, the Patreon site. You can find out how to do all that on the show notes. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, but most of all, tell your Wolfe reading friends. And until you hear from us next, a lot will have been going on since between one chapter and the next, but may the Moira favor you as it has Severian.
And all the androsphinxes and other things I can bear.
And cubiculum of moraic women. And may they favor you too. So,
I need glasses. I don't know why, but now that I have to wear glasses to read, it always seems like I'm just constantly
losing your glasses or putting them on.
Well, both, but just because I like they're just reading glasses, and I don't need them walking around. And I like if I do put them on walking around, then I get all dizzy and nauseous. So I'm constantly taking them off, and I've got like 7 pairs of glasses scattered around the house.
Yeah, that's even okay. That's Emily's life, and that's me always looking for glasses, and she's always having to buy new ones. Which, you'd think that we'd be swimming in glasses in this house.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I really don't know where some of them have gone. And what's irritating too is that like I've got to have like different magnification for when I'm reading and when I'm sitting at the computer, and it's irritating. This is all hell. So
yeah,
I even asked like my regular doctor when I had my checkup lately. I'm like, can I get LASIK now? And she's like, no, if you do it now, you'll need it again even sooner. Right.
Well, my doctor said, well, because I had got to the point where I really didn't need glasses anymore for reading, except for the fact that I have an astigmatism, which kind of messes things up. So it gives me a headache. Yeah. So I said, well, should I get LASIK or something like that? And she said, well, at your age, you could just wait till you get where those little nodules on your glaucoma or whatever it is, and then Medicare will pay for it. So I said, well, okay, well, let's hope for that.
yeah, that's just like the indignity of now they're telling you, just wait till you get sicker and then we'll deal with it. And that's coming, so it's not a irritating.
Now, the man is dressed in a San Benito. Probably he's dressed as a person being subjected to some kind of indictment or punishment for being a heretic. Hey, hang on. I got a call from my boss, of course.
Gotcha. It remains vague if she knows quite yet. I mean, she certainly figures it out.
Uh-oh. You just disappeared.
Soon, but
one of us disappeared.
So we'll see. Oh, shoot. I can't hear you.
My boss. Okay. So, I just put you on mute. I didn't go away or anything like that.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I figured. Right. My brain blanked.
Kibby?
Monkey Man. No.
Father Annihilation.
But I don't know, like, is this something else where he's possibly Father Annihilation, but I don't.
But they were doing that too. They were injecting these stories directly into the heads of people. Oh, I don't have to say that. Never mind. Cut that. Families are like, I don't need that.
Test. Make sure we're not clipping. Are we clipping? I don't think we are clipping. I don't believe so. Okay, let's do a run through. Oops. Actually, point the microphone at me would probably be useful. Okay.
Cubiculum is a catacomb, a burial chamber. Uh-oh. No. I hear you.
Bonus Patreon story time.